Hey folks, this is the Yaku Cosmopolitan. Welcome to my 2025 preseason NPB starting pitchers tier list. We will be running through 80 or so names today. I'm not going to spend too much time on anyone individually, but here are the tiers I've created. Tier 8 is called Fringe Rotation. These are guys who are just happy to crack the rotation. Not necessarily terrible, but also not the kind of guys you want to be relying on for quality starts. Probably more so guys that can eat innings every once in a while, and then you swap them out depending on the form that they're in. Tier 7, Prove It Youngsters. These guys are promising, but I need to see more to believe. In terms of talent level, they might even be as high as like a Tier 4, but just based on the lack of a resume, I can't really move them any higher. Tier 6 is basically the same thing, but for even bigger prospects. Lots of upside and prospect pedigree. So Tier 6 and 7, again, maybe in terms of pure ability, have the potential to climb all the way up to like a Tier 4, Tier 3 this year, but I'm starting them off kind of conservatively in this Tier 6, Tier 7 category. Tier 5 is the gatekeepers. I think this is a very important kind of middle tier, dependably average, but unlikely to be much more. The kind of guys that you can just reliably stick in the back of your rotation, you know, always kind of the ERA plus around 100 is what you can expect. Tier 4, mid-rotation with upside. These guys show flashes of excellence, but have lower floors. So maybe on their best day, they pitch like an ace, but they also have some rougher outings sprinkled in as well. Tier 3, kind of the better version of this, top rotation caliber, frontline ability, but some question marks, whether that be based on consistency or injury. Tier 2, star pitchers, good enough to be the ace on most teams. So, you know, these guys are among the best in the business. And then Tier 1 is reserved for those elite true aces, dominant stuff with the highest peaks. So let's begin. Tier 8, fringe rotation. Happy to just crack the rotation is kind of the description here. And we have about 10 names. I don't think I have included, every single person who's necessarily going to be a starter in NPB in 2025, but I have most of the guys that I think are good candidates too, or, at least they were doing it in 2024. You'll see on the screen the team that they're on, whether they're a lefty or righty. And then this might seem very simplified and reductive on the surface, but I'm only including their average fastball velo and then the KWERA minus, which is, strikeout to walk ratio based ERA. This is an ERA estimator, and then it is weighted so 100 is always league average. The lower number is better. So I think that as fun as it would be to display every single possible number to look at, these two numbers tell you an awful lot. And obviously they're not the only two numbers that I looked at while doing these kind of tiers. I really got into the nitty gritty of it, but at least when I'm kind of constructing the main categories they belong in, these are two big ones because the fastball velo, that is kind of the foundation of your entire arsenal. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you don't throw hard, you can't have success, but, it generally does. It's better to throw harder. And then with the strikeout to walk ratio, that is always, whether it's a small sample or a big sample, one of the best indicators of future success. So I'm sure if you got into some of the other numbers, there's going to be different ways you could potentially rank a lot of these pitchers. But this is the way that I've decided to do it. So once again here, Tier 8, a lot of kind of notable names like Masahiro Tanaka, who's making the jump from the Rakuten Eagles to the Yomiuri Giants this year, trying to get to 200 career wins. He's been so banged up and he basically looks washed, but I decided to include him here at the very end. There's other guys here who are actually fairly good, I think. Sacha Yamasaki for Nippon Ham. Miguel Yahure, who pitched for Yakult last year, he's now on Rakuten. Those two have very high ground ball rates, so they do have starts where they can actually kind of carve guys up in terms of getting outs, at least in an efficient way. Yuya Yanagi and Yasunobu Okugawa are two bounce back candidates. They looked pretty pretty atrocious last year, but Yanagi up until 2-3 years ago was one of the better pitchers in the CL. In fact, he won the best 9 at pitcher back in 2021. So I don't know what's really going on with him in terms of like the velo slip. Maybe it's just the age, but he's not really that old. So, curious to see what happens to him. And then Okugawa at one point was a prospect of a similar caliber to Roki Sasaki, same 2019 draft class. He wasn't really touted in the same way as Roki with his 100-mile-per-hour blow-you-away type thing, but some of the best command you would ever see for a teenager. And he showed that in 2021 when the Swallows won the Japan Series. That second half of the season going into the postseason, I mean, he almost single-handedly carried that staff alongside Keiji Takahashi. So all the injuries that he's had over the years, it's kind of tanked his stock, but full off season to recover this time. We'll see what happens. Other names here, Masashi Ito up until last year was, much better than this, but he was just so bad last year, was basically confined to the farm for most of the second half. So we'll see if he can bounce back. Hideaki Wakui, another veteran. Takayuki Kishi, again, a lot of kind of older guys that don't really have the best stuff anymore. Tier 7, the Prove It youngsters, promising, but I need to see more to believe. This tier is headlined by Haruya Tanaka of the Lotte Marines. You'll notice with everyone here, I have listed their KW ERA- on the farm as well because, some of these guys got a bigger workload in NPB than others. Every single one of them, though, at least on the farm, did have an above average KW ERA-. So that is a very positive sign. That didn't automatically translate to the NPB level for everyone, but there's a lot to like. The guys at the bottom, Sugai, Mori, and Matsukihira, slightly lower velos, but I definitely think they have decent potential. Akahoshi is, he's been a swingman. I guess he's the one guy that doesn't really fit into this tier in terms of like the experience level because he was on, the U23 national team for the Asia Pro Baseball Championship. He's been pitching, sporadically at the NPB level now for 2 or 3 years. And he's just kind of really unique because he has like a super high ground ball rate, like top 2 or 3 in all of NPB type stuff. We'll see if he can kind of sneak in as the number 6 this year. Ren Mukanoki for Oryx dealt with Tommy John. He almost threw a no-hitter in his second career NPB start back in, 2022 or 2023. I think it was 2022, and then he missed 2023. Came back in 2024, was a little bit iffy, but definitely the potential's there. His teammate Kyosuke Saito was pitching in the Australian Winter League this year. Tanaka, Fukushima, Saito, Sugai, Matsukihira, those guys are especially young. They're all 21 and under. So, a lot of potential with these guys. Tatsuki Koja was a first-round pick from a couple years ago. He's got a pretty solid workload at the NPB level last year as well. So we'll see if he can propel that into a better 2025. Tier 6, big-time prospects. Lots of upside and prospect pedigree. So this is obviously a smaller list, but at the top is Yuhi Nishidate of the Yomiuri Giants, their first-round pick from 2 years ago. He was kind of a swingman last year. Started the year as a reliever. Wasn't really doing all that great, but he was racking up like holds and stuff like that. So he was like, oh, maybe he's kind of a rookie of the year contender loosely. But they sent him down to the farm to get stretched out as a starter. And he absolutely dominated on the farm. As you can see, a 48 KW ERA- on the farm. So he was just blowing guys away, like a K rate over 30%. Gets back to the top team, and he was okay. Definitely wasn't able to make it as a starter quite yet, but flashes of brilliance as a reliever. So I think, full off season for him to work out some kinks, and he might really be explosive this year. Shinosuke Hada for Seibu, considered the Randy Johnson of Japan because he's so tall. 94.5 average fastball velo. He can run it up to 97, 98 in bullpens. His only experience at the NPB level last year was as a reliever for the most part. I think he maybe got like one start, but more of an opener situation because he didn't go too deep. But on the farm, definitely showing a lot of promise. I think 2024 was a big year for him in terms of improving that command and working on those secondaries. Yugo Maeda's the one guy here that's like a completely different prototype from the other ones. He does not throw hard at all. 87.5 mile per hour average fastball velo, but his changeup is nasty, and he's a command specialist. Almost like kind of the left-handed version of Okugawa from a couple years ago. I was saying he got a cup of coffee at the end of the year, and he got absolutely destroyed in his 1 NPB start. I do always think there is some risk of like, if you throw too slow, you might just not make it at the top level. So even getting his velo up a few ticks to 89, 90 would go a long way. But on the farm, he was doing amazing for an 18, 19-year-old rookie. Haruki Hosono and Hayato Tsunehiro were two of the big college prospects in the 2023 NPB draft. Neither of them really made an impact at the NPB level last year. But, you know, Hosono is a guy that can run it up to 98 from the left side. Tsunehiro also, like at his best, can be like 95, 96. You know, some injuries for both of them last year as well. So maybe that second year after being drafted will be a big year for them in terms of the breakout potential. Tier 5, the gatekeepers. Again, dependably average, but unlikely to be much more, which kind of sounds like an insult, but it really isn't. These guys are quite good, I think. Yuji Nishino is on here. A lot of these guys are more so sinker ballers. You know, Nishino, Yuki Nishi, Iori Yamasaki, Hiroki Takota, even Shinichi Onuki to an extent. A lot of these guys are, again, they don't have a good fastball, so they kind of have to hide it, and they have really deep arsenals to make up for it. And I think, you know, compared to guys in like tier 8, for instance, they have better command and a much higher floor. Kohei Azuma is the one guy who maybe doesn't fit in here because you can see the average fastball velo is much better. 2023 for Oryx, when they made the Japan series, he was making a lot of headlines because he was like 8-0 after breaking out in the second half, and people were expecting big things from him last year, but they didn't really do much. He has a death ball, which I think he learned from his teammate Taisuke Yamaoka, I would assume, just based on the fact that Yamaoka has probably the best one in NPB. But yeah, I mean, last year just wasn't too great for him, so we'll see if he can kind of rebound. I do trust that Oryx pitching lab to get the most out of their guys. You see that block of lefties there in Tajima, Takota, Otake, and Ozeki. And none of those guys really stand out in terms of the stuff. But Takota in particular has been getting the job done in terms of run prevention. He's had, a sub-3 ERA for 3 consecutive years. It's just that, you know, nothing pops off the page with him. His ratios are really poor. Does have that really fun palm ball, but that's about all I can say with him. Otake is the slowest thrower in all of NPB, really. I mean, 85.6 average fastball velo, but he locates it really well. He's kind of like Takayuki Kato light, who we'll talk about in the next tier. And he does those like really slow looping ephus pitches as well. So just kind of a master at getting soft contact and, you know, keeping guys off balance, but certainly not the type of guy that I can say will reliably be able to keep runs off the board. Now Higashihama, the only one here who had an above average strikeout to walk ratio last year, but he is kind of getting up there in age, and his strikeout rate has been dipping basically every single year, so I don't really think he's going to be able to keep this up. Plus he gave up a ton of home runs last year, so that was probably a little bit of bad luck there too, but at the same time, I think he is not really like any higher than tier 5. I don't think the Hawks view him as such either. Daichi Osira, very similar to Takota. Those two Hiroshima guys really benefited from their team's like perfect positioning and defensive prowess because the underlying numbers were not good, and yet they were keeping runs off the board very effectively. I mean, I think Osira had a sub-2 ERA, for God's sake. I mean, it's unreal considering just how bad some of the peripherals were. And Osira really only has the cutter. I mean, doesn't really have any other good pitch, but that one pitch is quite good. Tier 4, mid-rotation with upside. flashes of excellence, but lower floors. This is a pretty big list. You see Shuta Ishikawa, Carter Stewart Jr., Anthony Kay. Ishikawa making the move from the Hawks to Lotte this offseason, kind of replacing Roki Sasaki there in the rotation. He is a veteran, but, with that fastball curveball, still getting the job done. Actually, the best DWERA minus on this entire list. Stewart and Kay, I feel like, are very similar. Just one's from the right side, one's from the left side. They both throw 94 plus, both kind of wild, but they both have their, when they're on, they can be really unhittable. Yoshimura for Yakult, big breakout last year. I mean, he kind of tailed off in the second half, but I liked a lot of what we saw in the first half, and I think he can kind of mold himself into the ace, or at least the number 2 of this staff. Keiji Takahashi, kind of mentioned him when I was going on about Okugawa. Another guy who is really inconsistent all over the place, has his days where he's really good, but, when he's not hitting his spots, he can be really bad. Shogo Tamamura and Takayuki Kato, I think, are very similar. Kato's the veteran, Tamamura younger, but I think Tamamura in some ways does exhibit a lot of the same traits. It's like the fastball is really slow. I mean, it's sub 88 miles per hour, but pinpoints it perfectly. And he's able to kind of mix speeds, more of like a pop-ups and like fly balls guy than grounders. He had a really good strikeout to walk ratio, considering just how bad that fastball is. He has a really good slider as well. Kato, of course, has always been the prototype of that, tossing 85 miles per hour. But, with him, I think there is always kind of the discussions I have with people about Kato versus Takota. Like, oh, why don't you give Takota the same credit? Because they both, have a long enough resume now to where, maybe Takota deserves that same kind of recognition as, the underlying numbers don't look fantastic, but, he deserves that same kind of respect at this point. I just think Kato is like genuinely one of the best command pitchers we've ever had. His walk rates being like under 4% every year is a guarantee. Takota, I just don't see that with him. I see a lot more dead ball merchantry from Takota, to be honest, of just kind of leaving the ball over certain kind of zones of the plate and getting more batted ball luck. Whereas Kato, I really do think in any run environment can at least be average. We see our first couple of guys here that are new to the league, Rui-Yang Lin and Kyle Muller. I think these two, in my opinion, are the two best foreign additions this offseason. Gu Lin getting posted by the Uni Lions in the CPBL. I think this is probably stuff-wise a good range for him. He did pitch against Team Japan at the U23 Asia Pro Baseball Championship a couple years ago, and he had a no-hitter through like 5 or 6 innings, so he was absolutely dominating. Fastball can get up to like 97 from what I hear, but the average in the CPBL last year was 91.3. You see that, incredible 24.5% K-BB rate. So I think he can be really good. Does have a kind of a shallow arsenal, though. I think it's fastball, splitter, and kind of like a looping curveball, like a 12-6 in like the mid-70s range. That could be an issue for him. He could be really good, though. He could just be like a top 25 pitcher immediately, but again, I'm playing a little bit safe. Kona Takahashi, Masato Morishita, I think those guys are actually very similar in terms of their career trajectories. Kona, though, coming off that terrible year where he went 0-11, I don't think he deserved that win-loss record, obviously. I mean, he wasn't so bad that he deserved to be 0-11, but it was just a step in the wrong direction, obviously, for a guy that has MLB aspirations. He's going to have to wait on those a couple more years now. Morishita, also a guy that might go to MLB, question mark. The fastball velo, though, is dipping every year. I see a lot of trends that are not too positive. I mean, the K rate's dipping. He has like months where he just like cannot get a strikeout for his life. Kyle Muller, I just stuck him next to Kazuya Ojima. They're very different pitchers, but I think the production might be similar. Muller's a guy that, sits 92, 93, had a bit of a tough time in Oakland, obviously not the best environment for him, but he was league average in MLB last year. 13% K minus BB rate is just a smidge below average in MLB, and he was keeping the ball in the park. So, I think he's going to do really well, especially because he's tall, gives guys a really unique look in Japan. Ojima has always sort of been the classic high floor, low ceiling guy, but last year in particular, it was kind of really weird. He would have games where he's just awful and he gets knocked out after 2 or 3 innings. He would also have like 8 shutout innings at times. So you do see that KW ERA minus is a little bit better than a lot of guys around him, but I don't know. I just saw so many like atrocious outings from him that I can't rate him too much higher. Arin Curry, Naoyuki Uesawa, maybe it's just me, but I see them very similar just because Uesawa, he ended up going to MLB, didn't work out for him. He got rocked in AAA. He's back now, going to the SoftBank Hawks now, though, instead of his old team, the Nippon Ham Fighters. And then Curry was a guy who wanted to go to MLB, but decided to actually pursue domestic free agency to go to the Oryx Buffaloes instead, coming over from Hiroshima. Curry is weird because the fastball is terrible. It's only, 88 miles per hour. It gets crushed, but he has this diabolical changeup. Honestly, he should just do the Tommy Kahnle thing. Obviously, as a starter, you can't really lean into that too heavy, but he needs to just not throw the 4-seam at all. The 4-seam is just not good for him. The changeup, the way he locates it, the way he can get both swing and miss and ground balls on it. If he just pounds that pitch more, I think Curry can actually become like a top 25 guy again. Naoyuki Uesawa, like I said, was bad in AAA last year, but coming back to Japan, he should be fine. Tier 3, top rotation caliber, frontline ability, but some question marks. This is another big list of guys. Haruto Inoue, Yumito Kanemaru, Natsuki Takeuchi. I could almost put them in their own little mini tier because Inoue, his fastball definitely plays up for only being 91. He gets a lot of whiffs on it. You see that excellent strikeout to walk rate last year. Pitched for Japan at the Premier 12. Looked great there. Had some, gave up some runs, but he was getting a ton of swing and miss. Struck out Travis Bazana of Australia as well. Slider and splitter are both nasty. Yumito Kanemaru is the rookie. I have his fastball velo there, 92.3. That's what he threw over 2 innings while playing for the senior national team against Team Europe last year in March. So don't read too much into that. You could probably take a tick off. But if he's, in a similar range to Inoue and Takeuchi, but I like his off-speed stuff a lot more, and I think his command might be even better. You see that 33.2 K-minus BB rate across his college career. I don't know. I think Kanemaru is going to be a generational talent. When you just compare Takeuchi and Kanemaru's college numbers, and I know they weren't playing in the same league, so it's not 1-for-1, but Kanemaru is just he is the best left-handed prospect we've seen in quite some time. And that's not even in terms of just potential. I also mean right now with the polish, which is why Kanemaru as well as Nakamura, who I'll get to next, they're not in those tier 6 and 7 prospect tiers. I have them all the way up here already because that's how much I believe in them. Takahisa Hayakawa is really the only one comparable over the last 10 years or so. But Kanemaru kind of has that, good vertical approach angle. His fastball has a lot of good ride to it. I think as long as he stays healthy, because that's always a concern, he's just going to absolutely carve from day one. Ryosuke Otsu for SoftBank, I don't think got nearly the credit he deserves. He has that one-seam kind of sinker. He has the death ball. Just a really kind of fun guy to watch. Yeah, I don't think he really was viewed as a top pitcher because he got moved to the bullpen in the Japan series. But I think if they gave him a start, in that series, things could have been different for how the Hawks just completely collapsed. Haruto Takahashi is the one guy who doesn't belong here in terms of talent. You see that 74 KW ERA minus. All his pitches are just absolutely sick, especially the 2-seamer. But he's made of glass. He has not thrown more than 100 innings in a season since 2018, 2019, whenever he debuted. Overall, he's thrown 30 innings over the last 3-4 years. Tommy John in there too. I need to see him actually stay healthy until I can move him up. But in terms of the ability, absolutely, he belongs in tier 1. Trevor Bauer's back, which is, always going to be controversial. I included his numbers from the 2023 NPB season, 94.5 miles per hour on the fastball. It was a really good strikeout to walk ratio. He did have a bit of a home run problem. Part of that is he pitches in Yokohama. Also, he was really bad first couple of starts. Then he settled in. He ended up winning 2 Player of the Month awards. So, I always have to be careful with what I say about Bauer. He is not a fan of my work either. But if you look at the on-field production, what he did in Mexico and what he did in NPB the year before, I still think he's a very good pitcher. Obviously not a good person, however. Andre Jackson, who was Bauer's replacement last year, I decided to put him right next to him in this tier. The velo is the exact same. And Jackson, if you just go by, the end of season, he might even be like tier 2 caliber, because he was absolutely dominating down the stretch. Had like top 5 ERA in the CL in the second half, and he was outstanding in the postseason. That fastball changeup combo, he had that one at bat against Roya Kurihara where he threw him all changeups and just absolutely had him swinging out of his shoes, which was really cool. If you include like some of the first half struggles, though, I think this is a fair range for him. Shoma Kanemura for Nippon Ham has experience as kind of a swingman, but he was in the rotation towards the end of last year. I honestly was hoping for a little bit more from him, but I think he's on the right track, still very young. Gonna skip over Yuto Nakamura for a second. Anderson Espinoza, he is sinker baller for the most part, gives kind of Japanese hitters a unique look with those, not really a turbo sinker, but by, Japanese standards, throwing 93.5 mile per hour two-seamers is a rare look. And he was very good in his debut NPB season, so good on Oryx for bringing him back. Kohei Arihara led the PL in innings last year, and he did win the best 9, so, he was doing really well. Not a guy that has, like, the best stuff per se, but, really deep arsenal, knows how to pitch. Obviously had that short MLB tenure as well. Jeremy Beasley, I like a lot. He just pitches with a lot of brute force. I mean, that's what I always think when I watch him, because he puts his whole body into that delivery, and he can really blow that fastball by you. Cutter and slider are good too. Kodai Umetsu, I almost view as, like, potentially turning into an Atsuki Tanaichi type. It's a really shallow arsenal, but he sits 93.5 on the fastball. He can run it up to like 96 at times. He's had a lot of injuries. He at one point was like a top prospect, and then Tommy John kind of forgot about him, and then he came back last year. Didn't have the best surface level results, but it was about league average KWERA minus, and I really like the stuff. Like I said, I think if he locates the fastball better, and then kind of refines the sequencing, I think he can break out big time. Kentaro Taira is kind of the right-handed version of Haruta Takahashi, always hurt, kind of made of glass. Not a hard thrower, but he is kind of this supinator, and he gets a lot of like big breaking horizontal movement on his sweeper that gets some really crazy whiffs. Really just difficult look that he gives same-handed hitters especially. And in the short little bit that he has pitched over the past 2-3 years, he has some really gaudy numbers, really. And yeah, Nakamura, I thought about removing him from this tier before I made this video, but I'm going to keep him on. I know he is having a little bit of discomfort right now entering spring camp, so we don't know if he's going to be healthy to start the year. But for all the talk there is about Kanemaru, and rightfully so, I think he's a generational prospect. I think Nakamura is not getting enough recognition. I mean, this guy, when he pitched for Samurai Japan, it was only an inning of work for him in relief, but 97 mile per hour average velo, and the strikeout rate minus walk rate in his college career is even better than Kanemaru. Again, different leagues, tougher competition for Kanemaru, but Nakamura can touch 100 miles per hour. He did that at Harlem Baseball Week when he was in the Netherlands last summer as well. I just think in terms of stuff, like that is almost like impossible to fail as long as the velo is performing to that level, and he has that nice splitter curveball combo as well, just racking up swings and misses from what I saw in college. So I'm not sure about what the workload will look like for him, but I'm fairly confident that Nakamura is going to pitch like one of the 20 or 25 best pitchers in NPB this season. Tier 2, the star pitchers. Good enough to be the ace on most teams. You know, once you get into this point, which in terms of number, this is like the top 15. This is like number 9 to number 16 on my list, I believe. And you're starting to see the guys that I included inside my top 50 overall as well. In the video I just released a few days ago, you're kind of splitting hairs at this point because all these guys are really good. You begin to see, like, you know, the strikeout rate minus walk rate for all these guys is very good to elite. Chihiro Sumida for Seibu is a guy I'm much higher on than most people, I think. I just love that, you know, devastating changeup. Fastball is probably the worst out of everyone in this tier except Azuma, but I think he's able to hide it well. The splitter is a great pitch for him too. He really just gives a lot of guys a ton of different looks, and he's reverse splits because that changeup kind of fading it to righties is especially nasty. So he's able to get righties out at a much more efficient rate than lefties. But you know, maybe swap out that curveball for more sliders, more changeups, and we might see him improve against same-handed hitting as well. Ryuhei Sotani, a lot of hard lefty stuff, and he dominated in a small sample last year. 81 KW ERA minus was one of the best in all of NPB for starters. Tatsuya Imai for Seibu is among the hardest throwers at an average velo of 95. He should be an MLB, you know, one day, maybe next year or the year after. Hiroto Saiki, same thing for him. He could be an MLB any day now. We saw at the Premier 12, his fastball has ridiculously high efficient spin, 2,900 RPM at times, helps him climb the ladder top of the zone, gets all those whiffs. Does make him a little more fly ball prone though. Shosei Togo, another guy who's fly ball prone. He doesn't throw nearly as hard as Saiki, but he locates, I think, a little bit better, and I do like his splitter more than Saiki's. Saiki, I think it's really impressive that he's had a sub-2 ERA for, 3 straight years without really refining his secondaries, which almost makes me think he has another gear in him. But for now, this is a good range for him. Koki Kitayama maybe has one of the best fastballs in all of NPB. Velo-wise, it's only 92.6 on average, but the whiff rate he gets on it is, I'm pretty sure, close to the 99th percentile. I mean, it is crazy the amount of whiffs he gets. And then pairing that with a knuckle curve and splitter, very good. He just had a lot of inconsistency last year in terms of, like, over the summer months, he was completely MIA. We just didn't see him at all. He was down on the farm dealing with a little bit of fatigue, injury, whatever it was. But beginning of the year and end of the year, he certainly was carving. Shoki Murakami, who won CL Rookie of the Year and MVP in 2023. Small step back in 2024, especially in the second half. He actually lost his spot in the rotation at the end of the year, which is partially because Hanshin's rotation is just that deep and they couldn't afford it with the playoff race to have someone who was struggling. But I still like him a lot. You know, gave up too many balls in the air against righties last year, but otherwise I still think the command's great. He has good assortment of, 4 or so breaking balls. He should be fine. And then Katsuki Azuma, who doesn't really look like he belongs here based on that average velo being below 89 miles per hour, but he has displayed among the highest floors in all of NPB, at least since 2023, because starting from, he wins the Rookie of the Year in 2017, 2018, and then he has Tommy John, has like another freak injury. He barely pitched for 3-4 years, and he comes back and he's been a workhorse. He had that streak of 30 or so consecutive quality starts as well. Though he finished the year with like 4 or 5 non-quality starts, which was interesting. He was good in the playoffs again, though. So I'm a pretty big believer in Azuma. He just has a lot of different variations on like the slider sweeper, bunch of changeup grips. And, the fastball, it's not good, but doesn't have to be because he hides it well. And here we go, Tier 1, the Elite Aces. These are the guys with the most dominant stuff and the highest peaks. It is these 8 guys. Hiroya Miyagi for Oryx. He is my number 1 going into 2025. He has 3 different, off-speed pitches with a whiff rate over 30% each in that splitter, slider, and changeup. Also a good curveball as well. I mean, Miyagi, just, again, if you look at ERA, Takahashi's going to look a lot better from last year because Takahashi did have like a top 15 ERA all time last season, and it was sub 1 for most of the year. I like Takahashi a lot, don't get me wrong. I just think Miyagi, for having almost the exact same number of innings as Takahashi with a much better strikeout to walk ratio, I just see a little bit more upside in Miyagi at this moment. And the velo, like at one point, he was up to 93 or 94 on average. Like, this is really early in the year, but he can kind of run up that average fastball velo a lot higher than you expect for a guy that's kind of been regarded as being more of a crafty junk baller for the early part of his career. He's kind of both a power pitcher and a finesse guy at this point. And Takahashi, yes, he sits 94.6 on the fastball, but he's not just like a pure like brute force get you the swing and miss guy. He has the highest ground ball rate in NPB, which when you add that to the fact that he pitches at Nagoya Dome, which is an absolute behemoth, they're adding the home run terrace there starting in 2026 to move in the seats a little bit, make it easier to hit home runs there. But for now, he only gave up 1 home run in 2024. The dead balls, pitching at Nagoya Dome, the high ground ball rate, because it's more of a low spin fastball for him. It's a perfect combination for him in the modern NPB. Splitter is absolutely diabolical as well. It's really a splinker. Brandon 2 talks about this, kind of like that Paul Skeens splinker, the splitter sinker combo. And I like his cutter and knuckle curve as well, though he doesn't even really need those pitches to be on for him to have success. But if they're on, then I mean, that's when he's really shutting you out for the entire game. Shunpeita Yamashita, surface level numbers, you look at them and it's like, oh, he had a bad year, kind of a sophomore slump for him. But I mean, 96.3 average fastball velo, was number 1 among all starters, not named Roki Sasaki last year. 79 KW ERA minus, especially there in the last 2 months. He was just absolutely blowing guys away. A lot of double-digit K games. K rate approaching 40% over his last 6 or 7 starts. So just absolutely disgusting. Does have the curveball, the big looping curveball that he's kind of famous for, but the splitter is actually a better pitch for him in terms of the results. And then he's working on a changeup right now. I would love to see him kind of get another horizontal pitch in there, like a cutter or a slider sweeper eventually. I think that would really push him to the next level. In terms of future ability, future value, Yamashita is maybe number 1 on this list, if we're being honest. Like, Lance Brzdowski was talking about a lot of its pitch specs over the offseason as well. Don't be surprised if 4 or 5 years from now he's even better than Roki Sasaki. That's all I'll say. The lumbar issue with his back, a little bit scary with a young guy like this having these kind of persistent issues, but when he's healthy, he is absolutely electric. Hiromi Ito, I do think, by the way, after those top 3 guys, there's quite a bit of a gap for me. Ito's the guy I take, after those guys. Second half was just disgustingly good for him. K rate was approaching 30% down the stretch. Fastball was better. Velo wise, he got it up 1 or 2 ticks. The slider was working. He has a really deep arsenal as well and commands all those pitches really well. I love Ito personally. Foster Griffin for Yomiuri. As soon as he added that sweeper in June, just took him to the next level. He ended up having the best KW ERA minus in all of NPB, among starters with at least 100 innings pitched. So expecting big things from Griffin in 2025, and he can probably propel that into a pretty decent MLB contract next year. A lot of teams are already interested in Griffin. He can end up kind of like a Miles Michaelis, Eric Fetty type in terms of getting back to MLB and becoming kind of a decent mid-rotation guy there. Takahisa Hayakawa is the only one here with a fastball velo under 90. And I think it plays a little bit better than the velo indicates, but it's still, it's not a great pitch for him. But he locates it well, and his secondaries are like incredibly good. Finally had that breakout that we were waiting for in 2024. Always had these home run issues since debuting in 2021. But he has been able to finally kind of get into this groove thanks to that changeup and splitter and slider. I mean, he has a lot of really good pitches, honestly. Levon Moinello for SoftBank, first year as a starter after not pitching more than 50 to 60 innings for the first decade of his career. Just shows up and goes 163 innings, which is incredible in and of itself. Fastball, obviously he had to take a tick off. As a reliever, he was more like 95, 96, now more 93, 94-ish. But much like Miyagi, he just has so many just elite spinners. I mean, with the curveball, the slider, the changeup, he mixes and matches well against, depending on lefties and righties as well. Curveball, he uses the least, even though, 3,000 plus RPM, that's one of the nastiest pitches in all of NPB, one of the most aesthetically pleasing pitches as well. And then Atsuki Tanaichi, I did have him sneak in here in Tier 1. In terms of, like ERA plus, Griffin and Tanaichi were just around league average last year, but you look at the underlying stuff and they were elite. They are definitely elite. Tanaichi, good fastball velo as well. For a couple of years, I think he was having issues maintaining the velo, locating it, and then he has a shallow arsenal, so there are days when he gets rocked. If, say, like the forkball is not working and he's just completely fastball reliant, then that's an issue, but I think he can incorporate that knuckle curve more. Last year in spring training, he was talking about how that's going to be a game changer for him. I don't think he really felt comfortable enough with that to throw it too many times. So hopefully, this offseason, he's been working on that. He'd also really benefit from adding a sinker, I think. So we'll see what he does. This is showing the Tier 2 and the Tier 1 guys. So again, this is like the top 15, 16 pitchers on my list. Just listing out their fastball stuff plus, the fastball location plus. This is according to Bono, by the way, his excellent pitching data module. Their best off-seed pitch, and then the kind of splits. So, you see a common theme with all these guys in Tier 1 is an above-average fastball, right? Like Takahisa Hayakawa was the worst at a 103 stuff plus on the fastball. Everyone else is elite. Over in Tier 2, Sumida and Asuma are below average, but they do make up for it with really good location. And I think you do notice, though, you don't need to really spot the fastball all that well if you throw hard enough, or, as long as you have other great breaking balls that can keep guys honest. Imai does have the issue of being so wild at times that, he can fall behind in the count and then guys can just kind of sit on one pitch and get him. He has extreme splits, as you can see here, with a 65 xFIP minus against righties, which, at a glance here looks like it's the most dominant out of all these guys, right? So again, same-handed hitting, he is better than anybody, but he's below average against lefties because he doesn't have a put away against lefties. He's mostly like 90-95% fastball slider, and the slider obviously is not very platoon neutral. Does much better against righties, and he does have a changeup, but he kind of needs to refine that in order to, I think, manage his splits better. Everyone else, though, as you can see, they are above average at, getting both righties and lefties out. It's just that certain guys are just completely, blowing guys away. Like Miyagi is just disgusting against both. Takahashi against righties is completely lights out. Griffin, another one who's, amazing against both. Hiromi Ito, splits against lefties, has some slight problems, but unlike Ito, I think he can tinker enough to where he can work that out. Shosei Togo, who I think is a little bit lower on my list than a lot of people expect. I think that's one of the few guys I get pushback on from people, from putting him my number 14 or 13 best pitcher going into the year. Most people would have him easily inside the top 10, but I just don't think he pops off the page enough. You know, a 103 stuff plus on the fastball, 104 location plus. Okay, that's good. It's not elite. You know, his splitter is also really good, but it's not quite, you know, as disgusting as, say, a Takahashi or a Yamashita. And then you look at his splits, and yeah, it's just like he's very good against both, but he's not blowing the competition away against either-handedness. So that's kind of why I lowered my expectations on him a little bit. Koki Kitayama and Hiroto Takahashi, Shunpei Yamashita, you can see their fastball stuff plus is just really the best in the business. So, you know, really high on those guys in particular. But yeah, here is the visual representation of this tier list. This is 80-ish guys in total. So obviously you can do a lot of different ways to categorize these guys, but this is the way I chose to do it. And I will keep updating and finding some other unique angles to evaluate these pitchers throughout the regular season. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more NPB content in English.